Is God a frequency? You've probably heard this phrase on social media, in spiritual circles, maybe even from a friend who just got into manifestation or meditation. It sounds modern, scientific, and a little mysterious. We talk about raising our vibration, tuning into higher frequencies, and matching the frequency of what we desire. Some even say God is that highest frequency. But what does that actually mean? Is this just poetic language, or is there a literal scientific truth hiding behind it? Tonight, we're going to slow down and examine this idea with care. We'll look at what physics really says about frequency, how the brain responds to spiritual practices, where religious traditions might support or challenge this language, and why it matters how we talk about God. By the end, you may not hear the word frequency the same way again. Let's start by asking, where did this idea even come from? Before we decide whether God is a frequency makes sense, we need to understand why this phrase is so attractive right now. Many people feel stuck between traditional religion on one side and cold materialistic science on the other. The language of frequency sounds like a bridge, scientific enough for skeptics, spiritual enough for seekers. In this video, we're going to trace the idea's roots in physics, New Thought, New Age spirituality, and world religions, clarify what frequency actually is, and explore whether equating God with frequency is profound insight or category error. If you enjoy thoughtful, careful conversations where we respect both faith and reason, consider subscribing and tapping the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives. And try to stay with me to the end. We'll bring everything together into a simple, balanced framework you can actually use when you hear phrases like raise your vibration or God is energy. Let's start with the word at the center of the question, frequency. In physics, frequency has a very specific meaning. It's how many times something repeats per second. Sound waves, radio waves, visible light, brain waves, all have frequencies measured in hertz. Higher frequency sound has a higher pitch. Higher frequency light shifts from red toward blue. None of this is mystical by itself. It's simply about oscillations, regular cycles of up and down, back and forth. When people say everything is energy and frequency, there's a kernel of truth. Much of the universe can be described in terms of fields, waves, and vibrations. But the leap from the universe contains frequencies to God is a frequency is huge. To evaluate that leap, we need to distinguish three levels. 1. Strict scientific language. 2. Poetic metaphor. And 3. Metaphysical or theological claims about ultimate reality. A lot of confusion comes from mixing these levels without noticing. So where did the phrase God is a frequency actually come from? You won't find it in the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, or classical philosophical theology. It emerges more from a blend of 19th, 20th century New Thought, early radio culture, and later New Age movements. As radio and electronics spread, people began using tuning in and vibration as metaphors for prayer, intuition, and spiritual perception. Think of phrases like broadcasting positive vibes or on the same wavelength. Over time, some teachers turned the metaphor into a literal claim: God as a cosmic broadcast, love as a high frequency, fear as a low one. Add quantum buzzwords, self-help, and internet spirituality, and you get today's popular slogans. None of this is automatically wrong because it's modern, but it is important to realize this is a recent culturally shaped way of talking about the divine, not an ancient universal doctrine. That frees us to question it constructively. Now, some people defend God as a frequency by saying, well, isn't everything just vibrating energy? Physics proves it. Here's where precision matters. Quantum field theory and modern physics often describe particles as excitations of underlying fields. Matter behaves like both particle and wave. But when physicists talk about vibrations, They mean mathematically describable oscillations, not emotional vibes. Energy is a measurable quantity, not a synonym for mood or spirituality. Saying everything is energy is a bit like saying everything has mass or everything occupies space. Technically true in context, but not automatically profound. The danger is when we use scientific words as mystical decoration without their actual definitions. That doesn't make spirituality scientific, it just makes the science fuzzy. So if God exists, we need to ask, is God part of the measurable universe of fields and frequencies or the source and ground of that entire system? That's a very different claim. Let's flip the question. Instead of, is God a frequency, ask, why do people like this phrase? Often it's because it captures three feelings. First, connection. Frequency suggests we can tune in to something larger than ourselves, like selecting a radio station. Second, control. If God is a frequency, maybe we can change what we experience by adjusting our inner vibration through gratitude, meditation, or love. Third, inclusivity. Describing God as frequency feels less dogmatic, more open to people from multiple religions or none. These are valid longings. The phrase acts as a bridge between inner experience and a seemingly scientific image of reality. The question, though, is whether the image matches what's actually happening, psychologically, neurologically, and spiritually, or whether it's more like a helpful story we tell ourselves. To answer that, we need to look at what happens in the brain during so-called higher frequency states. When people meditate, pray deeply, chant, or enter mystical states, neuroscientists can measure changes in brain activity, often described as shifts in brainwave frequencies, alpha, theta, gamma, and so on. For example, some advanced meditators show bursts of synchronized gamma waves linked to intense focus or compassion. It's tempting to say, see, higher brainwave frequency equals higher spiritual state, therefore God is a frequency. But notice what's actually being measured. Patterns of neural activity, not God. These rhythms may correlate with certain kinds of consciousness, peaceful, loving, expansive. But correlation isn't identity. If a radio plays Mozart, measuring the movement of the speaker cone doesn't mean the cone is Mozart. Similarly, finding brain states that accompany spiritual experience doesn't tell us whether those experiences connect to an external divine reality or are purely internal. Neuroscience describes the instrument, not necessarily the composer, if there is one. Religious traditions themselves rarely, if ever, describe God in terms of frequency. Instead, they use categories like person, mind, spirit, being, or what beyond being. In classical theism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, God is not one thing among other things in the universe. God is the uncreated source of all existence, the reason anything exists at all rather than nothing. That places God on a completely different level from measurable phenomena like electromagnetic waves or sound. In Hindu philosophy, some schools speak of Brahman as pure consciousness or ultimate reality, again transcending physical categories. Buddhist traditions often avoid talking about God altogether but analyze consciousness and suffering, still not equating enlightenment with a literal frequency. This doesn't mean metaphors of vibration are forbidden. Poets and mystics across faiths describe divine presence as music, harmony, resonance, but they usually know they're speaking metaphorically, not giving a physics equation for God. From a philosophical angle, equating God with any physical quantity, including frequency, runs into a problem. Anything with a specific frequency is limited. It has a wavelength, energy range, and location in the spectrum of possible vibrations. But traditional conceptions of God describe something or someone unlimited, not bound by physical parameters. If God is real, God would be the Kian cause, or ground, of all frequencies, not one particular frequency among others. Imagine claiming, the author of a novel is page 57. Page 57 is within the story the author created. Likewise, Frequencies are features of the created universe, its pages. God, if God exists, would be more like the author, not made of ink and paper at all. Philosophers call this the difference between contingent beings, things that could have failed to exist, and a necessary being, something that, by definition, doesn't depend on anything else. Frequencies clearly belong to the first category. Still, there is something valuable in the frequency metaphor if we're explicit that it's metaphorical. When we say love is a higher frequency than fear, we're not making a lab measurable claim. We're describing a qualitative difference in experience. Love feels expansive, open, harmonized. Fear feels contracted, noisy, discordant. The language of vibration and resonance captures this beautifully. Likewise, raising your vibration can be a poetic way to talk about cultivating compassion, integrity, clarity, and presence. In many spiritual practices, prayer, chanting, singing, breathwork, sound, and rhythm literally are used to shape our inner state. So the metaphor emerges naturally from lived experience. The key is not to confuse inner resonance with radio frequency. It's fine to speak of tuning your heart to love, as long as we don't then claim inaccurately that physics has proven love is exactly 528 hertz or some specific number. What about all the claims online that specific frequencies, 432 hertz, 528 hertz, and others, are God frequencies or the vibration of love? Most of these are based on a mix of anecdote, numerology, and marketing, not rigorous evidence. Different tuning standards, like 440 Hz versus 432 Hz, simply set reference pitches for musical instruments. They change how music feels, slightly, but not in a cosmic way. That doesn't mean people's experiences with these sounds are fake. Music absolutely can be healing, calming, or uplifting, but its power likely comes from psychology, cultural associations, and how rhythm and harmony affect our nervous system, not from a secret divine code hidden at exactly one frequency. If a certain tone helps you relax and pray, that's great. Just be cautious about inflating a personal or symbolic experience into a universal scientific or theological claim. Otherwise, spiritual practice gets tangled with pseudoscience and becomes harder to defend or deepen. The deeper question is, what are we trying to name when we say God is a frequency? Often it's this. There seems to be a subtle dimension of reality where intention, attention, and love matter, where how we show up internally shapes what we experience externally. People notice synchronicities, a sense of guidance, an underlying order that feels more like yin and meaning than randomness. Frequency language tries to translate that into something scientific sounding. A more careful way to describe it might be: there are patterns connecting mind, body, relationships, and environment that we don't fully understand yet. Practices like prayer, meditation, forgiveness, and gratitude appear to tune our consciousness, and this has real effects on behavior, health, and perception. Whether that points to God, a cosmic consciousness, or simply the remarkable capacities of the human mind is an open debate. But it's debate about meaning and mind, not about Hertz meters. So, could there be any sense in which God relates to frequency? If God is the creator or ground of all that exists, then all frequencies ultimately depend on that source. In that loose sense, every vibration, every photon, every heartbeat is an expression within a reality sustained by God. Some mystical traditions go further, saying the universe itself is like a song God is continually singing, an ongoing vibration of being. That's still metaphor, but it's powerful. God not as a frequency, but as the musician, composer, and even the silence that makes music possible. From this view, when we say we're tuning into God, we mean aligning our lives with truth, goodness, and love, the moral and spiritual order of reality. Frequencies, brainwaves, and sounds can support that alignment, but they're tools and symbols, not the ultimate thing itself. Confusing instrument with source shrinks God down to a measurable object, which contradicts the very idea of the divine. Let's pull together the key threads. First, frequency and physics. is a precise term about repeating cycles per second, useful, measurable, and not inherently spiritual. Second, the phrase, ho, God is a frequency, is modern, emerging from new thought, new age, and pop spirituality, not from ancient scriptures or classical theology. Third, neuroscience shows that spiritual practices correlate with certain brainwave patterns, but those patterns are brain activity, not God. Fourth, philosophically, making God into any specific frequency confuses creator with creation. If God exists, God would be the ground of all frequencies, not one vibration among others. Fifth, at the metaphorical level, language of vibration, resonance, and tuning can be very helpful, capturing how love, compassion, and clarity feel higher or more harmonious than fear and resentment. The safest, most careful answer might be God is not literally a frequency, but frequency can be a meaningful symbolic language for our relationship with the divine. So, where does this leave you practically? When you hear phrases like raise your vibration or God is a frequency, you don't have to choose between eye rolling skepticism and blind acceptance. You can translate, ask, are they speaking scientifically, metaphorically, or metaphysically? If the claim pretends to be science, check the definitions and evidence. If it's metaphor, ask whether it helps you live with more honesty, love, and courage. If it's metaphysics, explore how it fits or clashes with deeper philosophical and spiritual traditions. If this kind of careful bridge-building approach resonates with you, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you'll see future long-form explorations like this one. Share this video with someone who's into vibes talk but also respects reason. And tell me in the comments, how do you feel about the phrase God is a frequency? Is it helpful, misleading, or something in between?